I took an economics class in college, and one of the rules of econ was that people face trade-offs.
One, two, three, go. Puff the magic dragon lived by the sea and frolicked in the autumn mist in a land called Honolulu. Little Jackie Paper loved that rascal Puff and brought him strings and sealing wax and other fancy stuff. Together they would travel with billowed sails. Jackie kept a lookout perched on Puff's gigantic tail. Noble kings and princes would bow whenever they came. Pirate ships would lower their flags when Puff roared out his name. Oh, Puff the magic dragon lived by the sea.
Wow, that was a really long and totally unnecessary intro. Hi there, Coach Sage Candidate of SageRunning.com here with another training talk. Today we're going to talk about increasing your mileage in the context of the 10% rule. Increasing your mileage, talking about that stress, but also taking into account other factors and variables that may injure you or keep you from progressing or really boost your fitness. So let's get started. Alright, so the first thing with the 10% rule is the idea or concept, and I do think it's a pretty good rule actually. I'm not going to totally debunk it here, but it's the idea that you progress, you don't increase your mileage by more than 10% on any given consecutive week. So for example, if you're running 30 miles this week, you're running a 30-mile week, it's about 48, 49 kilometers. The next week, you wouldn't increase over 33 miles or 10%. So the 10% coming from 10% of 30 is 3, so 30 plus 3, 33 for the weekly mileage. And then the next week after that, it would be, you wouldn't increase by more than 3.3, so you'd probably run about 36 miles, or 10% of 50 kilometers a week, 5 kilometers. So you go from a 50 kilometer week to a 55 kilometer week, no more than that. Right? And that's great, especially in that mileage range, and if you're getting up to higher volume. It's the problem where I see it is if you're an advanced runner and you're getting back into it, you could usually jump up maybe a little faster. Likewise, if you're a beginner runner and you're running 10 miles a week, or was that 16K a week, the next week you'd only run 10% of that would be 1, which would only put you at 11. So you go from a 10-mile week to an 11-mile week, and then next week after that you're up to 12 mile. It's a very slow progression when you're below 20 miles a week or 32K a week. And that's good because if you're a beginner, you want to progress slowly, like I said in my beginner running video. But the thing is, the mileage number isn't the end all. And that's my whole point of this, is that we're focused just on the weekly total, whether or not it's accurate. It might depend on how accurate your GPS watch is. Shout out to my sponsor, Coros. Enter code SAGE at Coros Global for a discount or for a free item on your watch band. That is a GPS watch plug. But when I started running 22 years ago, we didn't have these fancy GPS watches to track distance. We just estimated. And there's a good reason I was probably off plus or minus 5 miles, 8 kilometers, plus or minus each week in total on a high mileage week. So if you're worried about a couple miles or a couple kilometers here and there on consecutive weeks, realize that there's bigger factors at play, bigger variables at play, namely the speed at which you're running or the intensity in your training. So that's why I don't always follow the 10% rule, and I don't like the 10% rule, because it's not the end-all number. There's no single number that's gonna totally define you and say, oh, this will guarantee you that you won't get injured, or it's a good practice to slowly progress. And if you see our SageRunning.com training plans, even like the more advanced marathon, the BQ plan that's got a lot of people to sub 3-hour marathons, we generally do follow pretty closely the 10% rule in the mileage, but you're already starting at a higher mileage level, right? You're already up over 40 miles a week, and it is more of an advanced training plan. And we also go up and down with the mileage, right? It's not always just a steady increase. So what we see with aerobic base building easy mileage that I preach in a lot of these videos, check out the playlist, is that you do easy pace, conversational pace, it's easy pace running, and that pace isn't changing at all. So maybe you're building up from a 30-mile a week to 35 miles. Ooh, that's over 10%. It's over 10%, but you kept it slow. Maybe you even slowed down the pace, and you're doing these consistent runs, short to medium length long runs, not any super long runs, but short to medium length runs. And to increase that mileage, you either have to tack on an extra mile or an extra 2 kilometers each day, or you would have to run 6 times a week instead of 5 times a week or something like that. And it would be ill-advised to say, oh, I'm going to go out on the weekend and do this 12-mile long run, because that's over 33% of your weekly mileage, and that's a big stress. So how we run, how far we run each day, and how often we run is a big factor in this training stress. Not just what the weekly total is at the end of the week. And I actually have some notes here because we talk about the idea that you want to build up your mileage to get stronger as a runner, and that's really going to be the biggest endurance boost for a lot of people, especially as you approach, say, 100 kilometers a week or 60 miles a week. People get a lot of improvement when they go from 40 miles a week to being able to run 60 miles a week, right? Gives you a lot of endurance. But the risk of injury goes up as well with this increase in mileage. And my main point, I'll keep coming back to it in this video, is that it's not all about the mileage total numbers, because it's how fast you ran, what the relative intensity was, and what kinds of other hard quality workouts you're sprinkling in, because that is a big fitness boost, but that is also a big injury risk and training stress as well. So it's this delicate balance between getting your mileage and volume up versus how much intensity you're going to sprinkle in. And a lot of people say the 80-20 rule. That's a whole other video. I could get into that. And there's nuances with that as well. But we're talking about increasing mileage. We're talking about focusing on keeping your easy days truly easy. I see it with so many runners in high school, college, even some pro runners, as well as people we've coached over the last decade. They run their easy days too easy. You get sucked into a faster pace. Maybe it's a group run, maybe not nowadays, but you start running steady instead of truly easy, right? You think, okay, if I'm breathing a bit harder and I'm really huffing and puffing, it's going to give me bigger benefits. But that's supposed to be your easy day, right? And with speed in your running and pushing too hard, it's great for the cardiovascular system, but that impact force with each stride and each step becomes very great when you're running faster, right? So it's a matter of intensity making you, relative intensity, so to speak, that could cause you to get injured or to overtrain. And a big factor that you should focus on, probably more than just the 10% rule, right? If I go up slowly with this 10% rule and I'm increasing my mileage, as long as it's all at an easy, slow pace, that's all good and dandy. But what if I was going 30 miles a week, and then the next week I go down to 25 miles a week, but I start running faster on all my days? Maybe I sprinkle in a hill repeat workout, high intensity hill repeats. Maybe I do a 10-mile long run at the end of the week, and maybe I do a track session in there. Well, that 25-mile week just got a lot harder, and it's a lot more stress on your body and a lot bigger of an injury risk than if you had probably jumped up from 30 to 40 miles a week and violated the 10% rule, right? As long as you kept those miles all easy. So running easy, slow, and running slightly longer is one stress. Another stress in the totally different part of the equation is that relative intensity. How fast were you running each day? Were there speed workouts and high intensity hill repeats? And the vertical itself is another component to that. That's more of a trail runner type of thing, as well as the length of your longest long run. And that's why we say with the longest long run, generally, it's not good to be over 25 or 30% of your total weekly volume in any given single day, right? And so I wanted to chart out, I'm going to do some graphics, I'm going to get some pictures in here for you on this video, is the idea of mileage increase and diminishing returns with fitness gains. Again, borrowed this out of Jack Daniels' Distance Running Formula book. I read the first edition like 15 years ago. Whenever it came out, it was like the late 90s. Actually, that's like 20 years ago. No, it was around 2000. I'll put the date there. First edition. But the idea of diminishing returns was that as you increase your mileage, you get better fitness gains. And this is all easy running, right? But at a certain point, it starts kind of leveling out. So we see with a lot of elite marathon runners, and I've seen this with myself because I've been in this mileage range, is you get up to like 120 miles a week, or about 200 kilometers a week, 125 miles a week, and the next step up to 140 miles a week or 32 kilometers a day almost isn't worth it, right? There's an injury risk that's going up with this increased mileage, but there's also the idea that you have to give up some of your intensity workout and speed because you're so tired from running that much each day. So you see a lot of professional, really elite marathon runners who run low 2-hour marathon. They actually top out around there a lot, and some even run closer to only 100 miles a week or 160K a week. Now you don't have to worry about that, but what I'm saying is if you jump up from 100 kilometers a week, 62 miles a week about, and you hit 80 miles, you might get some strength gains, but after that, there's a risk for injury that's getting up higher. There's a risk for losing some of your speed at a certain element. So it's a delicate balance between how much volume you want to push, even if it's easy mileage, versus how much fitness you're actually going to gain. It's going to start being a diminishing return. It's going to start slowing exponentially the amount of benefit you could get. Now, if you're a pro, you're going for that extra 1%, that extra edge. But if you're interested in staying healthy and running for a long time, you might get bigger gains initially with that mileage boost, but then it's all about balance and sprinkling in the intensity, running with good form, raising the lactate threshold level, VO2 max, things like that. So, it's a trade-off. People face trade-offs. Now, the second component, of course, to this that I want to introduce is the idea of intensity, or adding in speed work. Now, speed work, intensity, running faster. We're talking about targeted workouts, going to the track, doing 400 meter repeats, doing high intensity hill repeats, even something like tempo runs where you're breathing really hard, you're pushing yourself, you're putting yourself in some pain. Great fitness boost, high risk for injury. High risk for injury because of the impact force, right? You're running faster, you're coming down with each step, there's more impact force there. So introduce the second graph. We see the injury risk rises exponentially, spikes upward as we increase training intensity, right? So you start adding in, 30%, 50% of your weekly volume, and it's high intensity running over 80% max heart rate. It's a higher injury risk, right? That's usually why distance runners keep the intensity as a smaller fraction. I won't necessarily say it's only 20% always. It could be less than that. It could be a little more than that. But generally, you're not doing a ton of speed work because you're not a sprinter, right? But it's also a big injury risk, especially if you're running high mileage. So the mileage is one stress, adding in the intensity is another stress, and we could even argue that the intensity and adding in the speed is a higher injury risk, right? It spikes up exponentially with the increase of doing all that. But this depends on a lot of factors. And like I said, I don't like to pigeonhole people in with rules, 10% rule, because we're all different. We're all different how we respond. Your injury risk, it's not a guarantee that you won't get injured even if you follow the 10% rule, right? It's this safety net thing, right? It depends on your bone density. It depends on your body weight. It depends on your experience. It depends on your diet. It depends how much sleep you get at night. It depends on your running form, how stressed you are. It depends on your shoes. It depends on what surface you're running on. Lots of variables at play, but I want to keep you healthy. I want you to be healthy. Generally, the 10% rule is pretty good to follow. But when I was in my roaring 20s, totally reckless roaring 20s, I used to go from 0 to 100 miles a week in 1 week. I wouldn't do that now, though. I wouldn't do that now in my 30s, I will tell you that. I probably could, but it's not worth the injury risk. Just like you jumping up, doing something new, all of a sudden, big spike could be an injury risk. And what we want to avoid is those overuse injuries. And, you're talking about a work equation, right? You doing work. Work is a product of force times distance, right? Moving your body a certain distance each week, be it 30 miles a week, 50K a week, or 50 miles a week, 80K a week, right? Force times distance. It doesn't really matter how fast you're running in that equation because you're still moving your body a certain distance. What does matter, though, and this gets into the intensity component of the equation, is how fast you did it. So then we look at the equation of power. Power is how much work we performed over a certain amount of time. So what we see is, that's the intensity component. And that's a totally different equation, right? You've got the mileage facing a trade-off with how much you want to increase in mileage versus the intensity and how much you want to balance with that. And that is a couple equations to think about in your whole training plan, and that's another talk altogether. Thanks so much for subscribing on here. Thanks to the Patreon supporters for really making this possible. Hope this video finds you safe and well in this time period that we're in, and you're staying healthy. And I really you could comment below with future training talk topics you'd like to hear about. I know this is kind of more of an advanced video. It's kind of long and boring, but we'll try to get outside more. It's actually really snowy outside right now and cold. But been cooped up inside for a while a bit. Trying to be patient. That's another big thing, is patience. But yeah, thanks for subscribing on here. Check out training plans and free articles and advice at sagerunning.com. It's a coaching website that co-founder Sandy Nypaver coach on there, and I had created and founded with training plans. So we'll subscribe on here for more of these types of videos. Check out our playlist. Got over a decade of running related content videos on here. Hope you're doing well, and stay tuned for more.